Hi everyone, sorry for the delay. I thought I'd have the week 3 summary video and the week 4 preview video posted by Sunday night, but I failed to do that. So it's first thing Monday morning and here I am making the video. So happy Monday everyone. I just wanted to spend a few minutes summarizing some of the key points that we talked about in our last class as it pertains to learning how to read cases. And that will lead us into our big topic for the remainder of the week, which is finishing learning the parts of a case so we can also start talking about understanding the court's reasoning. And from there, we will build upon that to learning how to do something called a case brief, which is a very fancy way of saying writing up a summary of a court decision. By the end of week 4, we will be really primed to jump deep into our legal research and learn how to find these cases ourselves, and that's what we'll pick up next week in week 5. But just for a little review, we talked about some important key aspects to finding cases anywhere. And I just want to stress that because, again, remember that this is a skill that you can take and apply to finding case law in other jurisdictions. So this is not just about Massachusetts cases. As we move through this unit, we will see how this all builds, and you'll find cases in other states, you'll be able to find federal cases, and you'll start to see the commonalities between how these cases are located and organized. So just a quick review and refresher as we move into this week. Cases from the appellate court levels on your triangles, so that would be the mid-level appellate court and the highest court in each jurisdiction, so like the Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts or the Supreme Court of New Hampshire, or even the U.S. Supreme Court. Cases from appellate courts are published in books that are called reporters. Reporters is just a generic name for a book that contains cases published in it. We are already looking at the pages of a reporter. We've identified this reporter as being called the Northeastern Reporter Second Series. And you can see that it's written right on the page. Remember, these are photocopy pages. This particular case of Jane Costa versus the Boston Red Sox Baseball Club is a case from the Appeals Court of Massachusetts, so that mid-level appellate court. And it is actually published in 2 reporters. So that means if you were in the physical law library, you could pull one reporter off the shelf, open up the page, and see this case printed. You could pull a second reporter and see the exact same case, and you'd have them both in front of you. When a case from an appellate court is published in more than one reporter, we call that a parallel citation. Sometimes there's just one cite for a case. Sometimes there's more than one. As we move into locating cases, we'll talk about some more specific examples of when you would find parallel citations and where you won't find parallel citations. The second reporter where this case is published is referenced here in this citation with the words Mass App Court in the middle. This is an abbreviation for the Massachusetts Appellate Court Reporter, the Massachusetts Appeals Court Reporter. That's what it's called. It's kind of an easy one to remember. The only cases it publishes are cases from the Massachusetts Appellate Court. That does make it a little bit easier. But you can see the formatting of the citations that we talked about last class being the same, beginning with a volume number, volume 61 of the Massachusetts Appeals Court Reporter, volume 809 of the Northeastern Reporter. This one appears, you're looking at page 1090. In the Appeals Court Reporter, it appears on page 299. Same case, front to back. All right, so we learned about reporters. We learned about citation. We also learned about the notion of parallel citation. We talked about identifying the parties to the case, the docket number, the court where that issued the decision, and of course the decided date being the most important date because this is the date at which the case became law and becomes precedent for future researchers. And this ties back to something else we've been discussing, which is mandatory and persuasive precedent. This is an appellate court, so it's a higher level court. But who is it mandatory and persuasive upon? It is mandatory for all courts lower than the Massachusetts Appeals Court in Massachusetts. So that would include the district courts and the trial courts of Massachusetts, that superior court level. It is only persuasive as to courts in other jurisdictions like New Hampshire courts, New York courts, California courts, and so forth. When we finished last class, we were jumping down a little bit of the case decision down here to see that the decision itself actually begins with the language on a September evening in 1988. What we'll finish talking about in class on Tuesday is about these numbered paragraphs. But let me just give you a little precursor, and I know this is also discussed in your book. These are called headnotes. You see where it begins. They're numbered 1, 2, 3, and 4. Sorry, I'm scrolling up and down. And then the headnotes have titles. So we'll just look at this first one, negligence, and then it has a little key and then a number 202, and then a little paragraph. The next one follows the same format. Negligence, a little key, and a different number. And then if you keep going, we get negligence, the same number, and then a totally different descriptor, theaters and shows, and a key number, and yet another number. These numbered paragraphs are called headnotes. New vocabulary word for you. As I mentioned in the last class, these headnotes are written by editors for the publishing system. So let's take a step back, and this is why I like to do this preview video. So when we talk tomorrow, you have some of this foundation knowledge from me and from the book. This Northeastern Reporter, as we mentioned, is published by a private company called West Publishing. As you already know, this is a huge publisher in the legal world. They publish reporters, they publish textbooks, they publish other manuals. It's a well-established, well-respected publisher. And West Publishing, a century ago or more, got into the business of publishing cases. And as we'll learn when we learn how to find cases, West came up with a system, and you can see it actually says it here, West Key Number System, of organizing how to find cases. Because remember, when a court issues a decision, the judge writes their words down, and then where does it go? As a researcher, we want to be able to find those cases. But could you imagine just walking into a library and seeing stacks of books and just say, okay, there's the cases. You might want to know, well, where are the cases from just Massachusetts? Or where are the cases that are just Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court cases? Because we're talking about thousands. And then what if someone said to you, again, our hypothetical client that came in and was hit by a hockey puck and wants to know if she can sue the Bruins for their injuries. Your attorney might say to you, can you please go find me Massachusetts cases where spectators were injured at sporting events? And you just walked into, I think someone used the word swamp. How would you ever find those cases? It would kind of be impossible. So West got into the publishing system and they said, okay, we know attorneys, paralegals need to find cases. We know that courts publish these, print these cases. So let's catalog them. So this is a little precursor into finding cases too. West established this reporter system and said each reporter, these remember books that publish cases, we're going to publish cases in chronological order. That's just it. As they come out, publish. But we're going to group them by jurisdictions together. So we'll group these states together and these states together. But after that, it's strictly chronological order. Okay, well, that's great. But that doesn't help me if I need to find cases having to do with negligence, someone getting hit at a sporting event. So then West went a step further and they said, okay, and this is getting a little ahead of us, but it'll help us. West, as the editors read cases, this is a cool thing, and we talked about this. I don't want this job, but I love it. As a case comes out, the editors for West Publishing will read the case, and they will ask themselves, what are all the legal issues in this case? What are they? And they will go through and pick out every legal issue in a particular case, the number of which doesn't mean anything. It could be, there'll at least be one legal issue, but there could be 20, 30, there's no magic number. And West will summarize each of those points of law in that case and write it here in a headnote. Let me say that again. The headnote which is written by the West editors, summarize every single point of law in the case that you are about to read. So one advantage to having these headnotes is that it's like a precursor of what's to come in the case. You can just skim the headnotes and say, what's this case about? Oh, I see. This case has to do with a legal duty. It has to do with people owning land and what happens if somebody's harmed. I see it also has to do with a spectator at a game. You won't know every detail about the case, of course, because these are just summaries of the points of law. You can actually read these and see that there's nothing specific in these headnotes about the facts of the Costa case, but they do describe the legal issues in the case. So headnotes are hugely helpful to us when we have many cases to read. Before we read every single page of every one of them, we can read the headnotes and maybe help prioritize, oh, this case sounds like one that I want to read first. This one sounds less interesting to me, and help us organize. It also just helps us understand what's to come in that cited case. The other reason we will see that headnotes are hugely helpful is take a look at how these are labeled: negligence and then theaters and shows. You don't ever need to memorize these numbers or these names. I just want you to learn the system. But what West did is it catalogs every single case by topic. So cases that deal at any level with negligence will have headnotes in it that say negligence. So this headnote, you'll see this not this week in week 4, but starting in week 5. We're going to learn something really cool. At least I think it's cool. We will learn how this headnote here, negligence key number 202, would link you to every other case in the whole country, if you want it, that also deals with this legal principle. Before liability for negligence can be imposed, there must first be a legal duty owed by the defendant to the plaintiff, and a breach of that duty resulting in injury. That's a legal principle. It's actually the law of negligence. This headnote, by its name and number, would link you to every other case that has this same point of law. Don't need to do that yet. We're not going to jump ahead that far yet, but I wanted you to see the power of headnotes. Okay. The last thing I want to mention before we move on until I see you in class tomorrow is really what we're going to be talking about. I really want to make sure that we understand how the court reaches its decision. So the big topic we'll discuss after we finish headnotes and the parts of the case is identifying the elements of the case that would go into a case summary. The big pieces of a case include this. Number 1, the factual story. The story of what happens in every single case. Like, what happened here? Who got hurt? Who had a breach of contract? Who are the real people here? Number 2, what is the legal issue for the court? Why is this even something the court is considering? It's not just because the court didn't have anything else to do on a Monday morning. Number 3, the holding, which is the answer to the issue. So whatever the court says, this is the issue that we need to figure out. Why is this case on appeal? The holding is the answer to that issue. The next big piece, actually I skipped one. There's another section called procedural history that we'll talk about. So we have factual history, factual story, procedural history, issue, holding. And then the biggest piece is to understand what we mean by the reasoning or rationale of the court decision. How did the court reach its decision? Again, not just because, oh, it's a sunny day, therefore the plaintiff wins, right? What were some of the precedent that the court relied upon? And how did the court do it? And the goal here is try to be able to put the court's words into your own words. Like if you were to describe this to your best friend, hey, here's what happened here. That's the goal. All right. Happy Monday. Enjoy the fall-like weather today, and I will see you all tomorrow, and we'll finish talking about Costa versus Red Sox. Have a great day.